Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm your host, Mark Philpott, and on today's show, I have a couple of great guests for you. State Highway 1 between Los Angeles and San Francisco is perhaps one of the most beautiful road trips there is in the world. Two ladies in one car on a road trip in California? What could possibly happen next? So ladies, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. How are you both today?
Doing well, thank you.
Zanne, this is your third time back on the show. You're almost one of my most regular guests.
Woohoo! I get an award for that, right?
Well, I'll have to come up with something. Yes, I love giving out awards, so I'll find something on my boat here that I can send you. Can't promise it'll be useful, but I'll find something.
That works.
Now, Julie, first time on the show.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Are you a podcast veteran? Are you a guest on lots of podcast shows?
This is actually my very first podcast.
Oh, really? I love that.
Yes.
That gives me a little bit of free rein, doesn't it, really? Don't worry, I'll be gentle on you, though, Julie. I'll be gentle.
Okay.
Now, ladies, before we get going and talking about this incredible trip up the California coast, road trip, nothing better than talking about a road trip with two ladies, I reckon. But before we get there, I'd like to offer you both the opportunity to dedicate this particular episode to someone special in your life. So, Zanne, who would you like to dedicate this show to today?
Honestly, I have to dedicate it to Julie. I mean, I have had quite a month, and she has always been there for me. Yesterday was a particularly rough day, and out of nowhere, I get a text, and she's showing me everything in the shop as she's going through. And so we had a virtual shopping day, and that just totally made my day. So, it's people like her, I think, that just make life more meaningful, and she takes me with on her travels even when I'm not there.
Wow, there you go. That's wonderful. Beautiful thing to do. Julie, how about you? Who are you going to dedicate this show to?
Well, Zanne and I obviously think alike, because as soon as you asked the question, I thought, well, Zanne, of course, because she's my wander gal.
Wonderful.
And yeah, the one that helps push me out of my comfort zone.
There you go.
Everybody needs a little encouragement.
Isn't that the
every
truth?
now and then.
Isn't that the truth? We do. We need a little bit of pushing sometimes to get out of that comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And as they say, that's where all the magic happens. So we're going to find out about your magic today, both of you, and what happened on this amazing trip. But first of all, the next thing I want to ask is, whereabouts are you actually talking to us from today? Because you're both in different locations. So where are you, Julie?
Yeah, I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Beautiful dry desert heat.
Yes.
Getting a bit cooler there now, though, is it?
Oh, I know. It's supposed to get down to 44 this evening,
Ooh,
overnight.
Time to put the sweaters on again.
Right, and cover the plants, maybe.
Absolutely. But it is a nice part of the world, that's for sure. What about you, Zanne? Where are you talking to us from today?
I am in the middle of all the LA wildfires.
Oh.
So I am up in Santa Clarita, and I have fires to the north, south, the west, and east of me. So having a little bit of an adventure here.
Yeah, and that's absolutely no laughing matters. I guess in terms of the rest of us around the world have been watching very closely the horrific scenes coming out of California this past week, and it is dreadful, and it's very pleasing to hear that you are safe and well, because some of your neighbours are not faring so well, are they, just in neighbouring counties?
Even in my own town, actually, the tick fire, as it's known, has been on CNN in the news the last few days. They finally have it contained, but now there's a couple other that sprung up, including the Ronald Reagan Library this morning was in danger. Right. And luckily they were able to put that fire out, but that was a close call.
Well, maybe we should also send a shout out to anybody who might be listening that's either affected or also a helper and supporter in that process. And I'm talking particularly of the fire people, because they do an amazing job in these sorts of situations. So let's hope everybody stays safe and well, and these fires go away pretty soon.
Yeah.
Now, you two have known each other for a while, and for the sake of my listeners, can you tell us how you actually met each other and what inspired this whole concept of Where Gals Wander?
Julie, do you want to tell the story about how we met?
Well, we met at a neighborhood bunco evening
Yeah.
with a bunch of neighbors, and sitting at the same table as Zanne, we were chatting about what I used to do with some neighbors back in Indiana, where I used to live. We would put out these plastic flamingos in the yard on a Friday afternoon, and that would basically like signal to everybody else that it was time to come over and hang out and just, everybody bring their own food, bring their own drinks, and just kind of have a fun evening. And Zanne kind of ran with that idea, said she loved it, and threw the first flamingo party in our neighborhood.
Flamingo party.
Yep.
Yes, and so it kind of, of course, after getting together and just having so much fun, and I mean, it was like years that we had these parties, and just, our friendship grew. And then when she moved out to California, I went out there right when before you even moved in. I think you were still in temporary housing, Suzanne.
I was, yeah. I was just out here by myself. I think I was out here 2 weeks, and you flew out to kind of help me get settled.
Right. And then, she was just experiencing all new things. And I think you want to jump in here, Zanne, and tell how Where Gals Wander then was born from that?
Yeah. Well, I think you and I were just setting off exploring, and it was, where do we want to go today? What do we want to do? And just jumped in the car and we explored everywhere all over LA. And as we were taking pictures to kind of share with our Chicago friends back home, we were telling kind of the stories behind what we were up to. And I said, this is a great way for us to keep in touch, Julie. Like, you were still living in Chicago at the time. Like, we should have what we're doing on a regular day-to-day basis as a way for us to keep in touch. And, we can be sort of a source of amusement sometimes. And I bet that we would get some folks to kind of follow along. So we mostly started it for she and I to stay in touch, but then to also, as she said, kind of push each other out of the comfort zones. If we have this commitment to go out and do stuff and share it, it's going to force you to go out and actually do stuff, to kind of hold each other accountable.
It's a great concept, and I think one of the things that I've been learning over the recent weeks is all the people I'm talking to on the show who have started travel blogs and travel writing have all done it initially to keep in touch with friends and family. That was the main inspiration behind it, such as yours, and then saw an opportunity to share it with a greater audience. And it's fantastic because people get to share in these things, and like we're all doing, we're trying to get people off the couch and go and travel and have new experiences in life. So it's really a wonderful thing.
Oh, I was just going to say, our motto is more to life. So it's also the idea that you don't have to travel across the world, although Julie, she's our international traveler, but to get out and explore even what's in your own town, or to try something new, or to sort of get unstuck, as we call it. So, our intention was never to be this great inspiration or glamorous travel bloggers. It was more, how do you find a way to just seek more of that meaning and personal connection in your everyday life?
Yeah, brilliant. That's good, because a lot of people don't have the time sometimes to go off and do extensive traveling trips, and being able to do things in weekends or long weekends is also a great release, and to get out there and have a different form of travel.
Right. Even just for a day or an afternoon. My sister who lives here, she'll have the weekend off, and so on a Saturday we'll just jump in the car and find a new mountain to go hike. And that's only just a few hours, but it's just exploring something new.
So tell us about the planning of trips when you do something together, like this particular road trip in California. How does it all come about? How do you Do you have a next destination in mind that you talk about previously and then you go about planning it? How does it come around?
Well, there's always plans, and then there's always things that happen where the plans don't work out quite as the way that you thought they would. Um,
That's called life, isn't it?
yeah, it really is. I think we had sort of a loose itinerary. Originally, we were going to do many days, and the original goal was to go all the way up to almost San Francisco. And then things happened. I had some personal stuff kind of going on. I didn't want to get too far from home in case I needed to get back, quickly, that I could do so in a day drive or so. So we scaled it back and went as far north from LA up to Santa Maria.
Right.
And it was supposed to be this relaxing sort of winery tour. We wanted to do some wine tasting. We wanted to get some scenic shots. We knew we wanted to do Hearst Castle. Um, the wine tasting didn't quite work out that way.
No. But we saw wild zebras at the
We
Hearst Castle.
did. Yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
that was part of it. Yeah.
So let's just go back and talking about this particular again for people outside the United States who are not familiar with geography of California. State Highway 1, which runs up the entire coast from Los Angeles to actually north of San Francisco. It actually finishes around Sonoma or around there. It's about 650 miles in length, and it's arguably, as I said in the introduction of the show today, it's arguably one of the best and most beautiful scenic drives there is in the world. And you can really take on different aspects of this. You don't have to do the whole thing, as Zan and Julie explaining to us today what they did. How many miles was it from Los Angeles to where you both went?
Uh, I have no idea. It never really occurred to us to track that, to be honest.
Check the
Yeah, I
mileage.
mean, like I said, we knew that there were specific things that we wanted to do, but we didn't put the focus on how many miles we had to go or how many photos we had to take. I think that's one thing we really enjoy about just traveling with each other is, first of all, it's always about the journey, not necessarily how many posts we can make for our social media accounts or things along those lines, but how do we have an experience or an adventure that's meaningful for us? And
Yeah.
Mark, do you mind if I just take a tangent and just tell a small piece of one topic that we talked about on our journey?
Go ahead.
Julie and I were talking as we drove through the mountains about how 10 years ago, the two of us couldn't even fathom doing this trip by ourselves. When we first met at that bunco party back in the suburbs of Chicago, and just being so focused on, I guess, what would you say, Julie? Like stereotypical suburban mom type of.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, the kids were younger. We, had different types of
Right.
responsibilities with them then. I think, yeah, as our kids are getting older, it's allowing us some
Yeah.
more freedom.
But to sit there and talk about one day we're going to drive the Pacific Coast Highway, just she and I, and we're going to take a few days and just go explore, that would have been absurd to us 10 years ago. And now, the more that you travel and the more freedom and confidence and wanderlust that you get, you never even think twice about it now. I think for Julie to fly out, me pick her up in the car, and as soon as I picked her up from the airport, we started driving up that coast. So we focused more on that than marking things off the map.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm interested to go a bit deeper into that whole life transition because I find it fascinating. You both moved away from Chicago. You went to different parts of the United States to live through obviously different reasons. How was that transition for you both coming out of a biggish city like Chicago and going to somewhere completely new? Did it take a while to transition and get into your new homes respectively?
I think moving is actually one of the most difficult things to go through. I've move. This is my second move to a new state. And this time I was more optimistic about the move this time because the last time I moved from Chicago to the Indianapolis area, I kind of went kicking and screaming, not really thrilled about it. But it ended up being like the best years of my life. I mean, it was a wonderful move. And so when I moved, I just kept that in perspective that, there's, new adventures to be had and, good will come out of it. But just getting acclimated to especially here, a new climate is a little bit, the summers are pretty brutal here. And getting settled in your, new hometown, it can be a little bit challenging. But, I think too, just with social media and keeping in touch with friends, and it's another reason it was strange that a year after Zanne moved to California, I moved to Arizona. And I was kind of like, well, I can do this. Zanne did it, I can do it, so. And I knew we were going to still stay in touch, so.
You were each other's inspiration.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of people outside the United States don't understand the cultures within the US, and moving from Chicago, Illinois out to California is quite a cultural change as well, Zanne. How did you find that big difference from being in a big city like Chicago going out to the laid-back lifestyle of California?
Well, I guess first I worked in downtown Chicago in the city, but Julie and I actually lived in a tiny little suburb that was mostly farmland. It was kind of a farmburbia, if you will, half suburb, half farm community. Like my house would back up to acres of corn. So just from that perspective, like there was no landscape, there were no mountains, there were no places to really hike. It was very much a stay indoors, let's go shopping, go to the movies, go out to eat type of experience, versus being here out west. I think it is much more about being outdoors, about being healthier living, about having a different type of lifestyle. Another thing that I think on the flip side is hard to get used to is it's Halloween here in the United States tomorrow, and it's snowing back in our old hometown. So even that experience of taking the kids out and going trick-or-treating in the freezing cold and the snow versus here, we were in shorts yesterday. I took my daughter to a Halloween party over at our local church Sunday night, and they brought a live giraffe for the Halloween party. So not quite what I was used to growing up in the Midwest. We don't have giraffes at our Halloween parties. So
No.
Yeah. And what about you, JD? What about moving to Arizona? Like, you're in the middle of the desert almost out there. So how was that transition this time around for you?
It's been really good, actually. I have taken on some new interests since moving here, like hiking. There's mountains all around, so I'm getting outside more often than I used to. I'm drinking more water than I used to, which is a good thing because it's just so dry here. I have to keep drinking water.
That is a good thing, yes.
So, and then there's just so many things in the state. If we want to get to a different climate, we can within 2 hours. We can go up north, and there's pine trees up there, and it's cooler temperatures. And, jump in the car. I can be in California in 3 hours. So I'm enjoying being close to, other states and being able to get out and explore a little bit more.
Right, let's get back to the road trip. So, Zanne, you picked up Julie from Los Angeles Airport and away you went. Where did you first go to? And was there a plan to go to that place, or were you just basically driving north?
As we were driving north, we made the decision to stop actually off the Pacific Coast Highway, take a little detour to this charming little Danish town called Solvang. And part of that was because we wanted to really take in the views of the coast. And during the time of the year that we went, there's something called the marine layer or June gloom, even though it's not June, that settles in. It's like a fog over the coastline, and you really can't see anything. So we first drove up and we stopped in Ventura for a bit, saw the ocean, drove up through Santa Barbara, but kept on going into the mountains. So we took a small detour into this Danish town. And I mean, Julie, I was so excited to show it to her because it really is like a fairy tale town. The entire town is like stepping into Denmark, basically.
Tell us about the history of that, because first of all, why does it have a Danish influence? What's the historical significance behind that?
So basically, when the settlers first came over from Denmark with their families, they settled in this valley, and it's set in a winery area. There's a lot of vineyards and such there, and generations have just settled and lived there for decades. We actually spent some time talking to a shop owner who happened to just chat with us about the Danish Days festival that was happening that weekend, and about how they had a parade, and about how her parents had participated in the parade, and her kids were going to participate, and this is something just through the generations. So I think that I don't know the whole story behind it, other than, and I'm going to blank out on their names. We saw statues of the founders as we walked through, but it was just so charming, and the windmills and the bakeries and the little coffee shops and little shops. It was just wonderful, and we stayed at the Cork Resort, which was like a 5-star resort, and it was just so comfy and warm and accommodating. I definitely want to go back at Christmas. I'll be honest with you, Jewel. I think that we should take both the families and head up there for the holidays.
Yeah, it sounds like they have lots of great things to do then.
Well, when it comes to choosing a place to stay, like the place you just mentioned, the court, is this something that you've already had planned in advance? You've done some research on that, or do you just find these places when you rock up to these towns?
So in the case of the Cork, we had researched and planned and stayed there. To skip ahead to the second night, it was a little bit more spontaneous, and it was sort of a cursory glance in the fact that we knew we wanted to stay in Santa Maria. We knew we wanted to do some wine tasting. We hadn't really researched where it was, and well, it kind of scared the heck out of us when we arrived.
Oh, the joys of traveling.
Yeah, Julie, you want to share your reaction when we first started driving through the town?
Well, I think we both kind of, yeah, looked at each other when we passed a bail bonds place and maybe a strip club.
Yeah.
Was just driving through, it was kind of like, okay, maybe we chose the wrong location. I think we even said it out loud, like,
Yeah.
should we cancel and just keep driving?
Let's just get into the car for a minute, because you're both driving up the coast there, and I've got this vision of what this kind of looks like and what's going on. There's probably lots of talking going on. The radios. What's on the playlist on the radio?
Well, we had a lot of 80s music going on, I think. And then at one point I put on country music,
Yeah.
which
Yes, you
yeah,
did.
and you can hear from JD's tone that, how much she appreciated that. But as I said,
A little bit
you
of
know what?
country is
Hey, I
okay.
was driving, so driver gets to pick the music. That's the rules. So I did.
Oh, did you drive the whole trip? You did. Okay, so Julie never
No,
got
I
to select the
didn't.
music.
Yeah.
Next trip.
Next trip, okay, that's on the record as well there, Julie, so you've got that for that. Okay, so a bit of country music and a bit of 80s music. What about snack foods? What was being snacked on along the
Yeah.
way?
Honestly, I don't think we snacked much. We were talking too much to snack.
Well, and here's the thing. So we would stop randomly and, jump out of the car because we would see something really cool and grab some photos. And as a result, we ended up arriving at all of our destinations so late that we would arrive exactly 10 minutes after wherever we wanted to go had closed. So we
Oh,
never got our wine tasting until the very last night. And most times I think we didn't even eat lunch like one of the days, right, Jewel?
No, I don't think so. We just kept driving. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
beautiful along that coast.
what are some of the best parts of traveling together versus sharing this with family and stuff? Being two friends as close as you two are, what are the highlights of actually
Well, I
sharing a
think
trip like this together?
between the two of us, there's not a lot of drama. I think it's just nice just to relax and not have to worry about making sure that the other people you're traveling with are taken care of. Um, Julie and I think, are so comfortable with each other. Like I can say to her, I'm hungry, I'm crabby, we're stopping, I'm getting coffee. You know?
Or I need chocolate.
Mm.
And we
Yeah.
picked out this really
Yes.
cute little chocolate place.
And you dived in there and got some of that, Julie.
Oh, I did.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Going back to Solvang, because you were talking about what's on offer there for tourists to come in, for people who are coming from outside of the United States and are planning a trip through the US, coming to a place like this, and if I remember right, it's about 45 minutes northeast of Santa Barbara, Solvang. So if we're actually thinking about putting an itinerary together for somebody, how many days would you suggest they spend in that particular area? Is it an area that you can see everything in a day, or is it best over a couple of days? What would you say about that?
I think we probably could have spent a full day there. Like an ideal situation would have been to arrive in the morning, spend the whole day there, spend the evening there, because it is pretty remote up in the mountains, only for that standpoint. The wine tasting there starts at 10:30 in the morning, and so you wouldn't want to do that all day, all night long, and then try and drive somewhere else because it would be a far distance to get to wherever it was that you'd be going next.
So spend a couple of days having a good look around the whole place, and there's a lot of different things to see from a historic point of view as well. There's a motorbike museum there, I think, isn't there?
There is. There's a motorcycle museum there. They have their own theater as well. A lot of theatrical performances. There's quite a number of festivals. Fantastic restaurants. So there's quite a bit to do there.
So in regards to the cuisine that's on offer, is it typical American fare, or is there a Danish influence? How's the kind of meals?
There's so many restaurants there. We went to one the first night, the Succulent Cafe, and Julie had this like fantastic pineapple, whatever. What was it, Jewel?
Oh, pineapple cider.
Yeah, which is like a malt liquor.
Right.
That was fantastic. And then the next morning, as we were walking around, we saw all the traditional Danish restaurants with Abelskiver. I don't know how to pronounce it, but all of your traditional cultural dining. But we left fairly early in the morning. We stopped. Julie twisted my arm to introduce me to these acai bowls.
Acai bowls.
Yeah, thank you.
Acai balls, yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic stuff.
I love them.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. So, Zanne, are you having one every day now?
I actually just had one this morning, as funny as that is.
There you go. There you go. Now, you two, when you travel, are you people that kind of source out interaction with other travelers as well? Do you go up to other people and, ask them where they're from and all that sort of stuff? Or do you like keeping to yourselves and just going and doing your own thing?
Well, we like talking to other people, but I'm trying to remember in Solvang, we got there so late, we didn't really. Well, we did talk to the gal at the
So
restaurant.
late. Now, when we went to Vegas a couple years ago, that that was a very different type of trip. And I think that was much more social, let's say. You know, as you're driving on the highway, there's not a lot of people to interact with other than when we would stop. So,
Going up the coast, you mentioned that you stopped off at some different places. As far as those out there that are, big on photography and that, what would you recommend are some of the real key points where you just want to pull the car over to the side of the road and make sure you got that particular shot? Can you mention some of those for us?
Honestly, I think wherever there's a little pull-out, stop. Take advantage of it. I couldn't even tell you where it was off the road, but if you see cars parked on the side,
Yeah.
join them, pull in and then get out and take advantage of the views.
yeah.
Yeah. And did you venture off down onto the beaches and stuff at all?
We did. Was it in Goleta that we kind of did a little bit and spent some time there? There's some fantastic photos of Julie that I captured on our social media that I think are just stunning with the background behind you, if I do say so myself. But we spent quite a bit of time there, just north of Santa Barbara. Like I said, it was in a Vista Point pull-off park-ish area called Goleta.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
So what do you think it is that makes the Californian coast so special?
Yeah. I would say just the diversity of the coast and watching it change. Do you want to share a little bit, Julie, just about like the differences even in the water and the cliffs as we drove through?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously some places are rockier than others. But even just, I think, like Zanne is saying, it's the diversity in the towns driving up the coast. They all seem to have their own little, like, personality.
Right.
We started in Ventura and then going to Santa Barbara, and they just all have their own uniqueness about them, which is nice.
Has it given you an appetite this trip to go back and perhaps do more of the coastline up towards San
I
Francisco?
would love to do that.
Ideally, how long do you think you would need to enjoy that in its totality and making sure that you took in all the different places and things to do along there? What would you say would be a good schedule for people to plan to do that trip?
Maybe a week.
That's what I would say too. I mean, I would love to spend just even a couple days just up in Big Sur, and we didn't make it that far north.
So anything you'd change about the trip you did in terms of the way you went about it, planning, anything like that?
No, I thought it was perfect. It's perfect.
Perfect.
Except for that hotel.
I was going to say, what about the country music, Judy?
Well, that's okay too.
And did you put any cases of that pineapple drink in the trunk of the car to take home?
No, but at the winery in Ojai, I wanted to carry home some wine, but I just didn't have room in my suitcase to fly home with it.
Look, it's an area of the world that's not perhaps as famous for wine as, say, the Napa or Sonoma area in California. So are there a lot of wineries up around that area?
There really are. It's sort of the region between Santa Barbara through the Ojai Valley up to Paso Robles. That's kind of ranked third, if you will, in terms of the California wine country. A lot of different regions, but we learned quite a bit when we finally did get our wine tasting about how each vineyard has their own plot in the same vineyard, but the way they cultivate the soil and the grapes and how they harvest and how they blend is what gives it its own unique taste. So I thought that was really interesting just to learn a little bit more about that too.
Are the winemakers locals, or are they people that have come from overseas to start vineyards there?
I would say for the most part, they're all local. I know that there are some that have come from overseas, but all the ones that we met on our trip were all locally based.
Lots of foodies listen to my show, so is there anything in particular about the food on this trip that stands out that you want to throw out there as a must-have if somebody's going to take on this adventure up the California coast?
I mean, the food was good, but I can't recall of anything specific. The other big highlight of our trip was Hearst Castle, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but um, the dining around that area is supposed to be
Right.
amazing. But again, due to time and needing to try and get back on the road, to return eventually back, you know, to where I live, I think we weren't able to do that. We did more of a dash and dine type of scenario.
Yeah, Hearst Castle is famous and has a lot of 5-star ticks against it for a destination to go to if you are in California, as does much of that coastline. I think there's some fantastic places to visit. Now, you talked earlier, Zan, in particular, about the fog coming in, and that's something that's fairly unique to that coastline. What time of the year would you suggest is probably the best time to go up the California coast by road?
I would say between October and like mid-November, and then again sort of March to May. The only problem is in the spring, sometimes you hit the rainy season. Um, and again, because you're on the coastline, that can mean landslides. The
Right.
Pacific Coast Highway up by Big Sur was closed for, I think, almost a year because of the massive landslide that happened. They just now repaired the road to travel back up through there. But that's something about being out here in California. If there's a landslide or a wildfire, there aren't many other routes that you can go as an alternative. So,
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. If there's something like that happening, you need to head inland, I guess, and that takes away all the beautiful scenery that you wanted to see along the coast road, right? Yeah. So, Julie, after you do these trips, and in particular with Zan, your good friend, how does it make you feel? Does it give you a real lift and motivation in life? Not saying that you're not motivated anyway, but I'm just saying it's that having that freedom and sense of purpose of travel and all the rest of it. How does it make you emotionally feel after you've done these sorts of trips together?
Yeah, it makes me happy that we got to, spend time together because any time with Zan is a great time. And, it's just about making time for people that are important to you. And so, it just makes me want to plan the next trip. And, and I'm just glad that, we both make the time for each other to do these
Mm.
things.
How about you, Zan? What are the takeaways for you from a trip like this with Julie?
I think it just re energizes me. I think it helps me remember who I am, as a person without all the other labels of, worker or employee or mom or wife or any of those, when you can just be with somebody who lets you be you. And I think we spent so much time laughing through the whole trip. Um, and how could travel be any better than that?
I must say it's a lovely thing that's coming across in the show today is your connection with each other and how important that is, but also how wonderfully free it is in terms of the energy you obviously give each other, and it kind of at some stages even overshadows the trip itself as the connection you two have in whatever space you're in. It could be the California coast or it could be driving through the desert on the way to Vegas, I guess. So it's a lovely thing to hear, and of two people that have got that kind of friendship.
I think even when we lived back in Chicago, and Julie referenced in the beginning of the call these flamingos that we would have,
Mm,
um, those became such a regular thing that we would have them, at least in the summer, almost every weekend. Julie, we would have one sort of, I'm going to throw this plastic flamingo up in the yard, and everybody bring over food and the kids and chairs and music, and we'd have bonfires going, and it really created a sense of family and community. Um, we
mm.
even upped our game then when we started moving inside and having these flamingo sort of theme parties. So, Julie, do you want to share the fact that We started our trip on what's known as International Pirates Day, and how we used to celebrate Pirates Day back in Chicago.
Oh, yeah, I think it was in my basement. We
Yeah.
all dressed up as pirates.
Who actually started this International Pirates Day? I've never heard of this before.
I don't
You
know.
know how they have the goofy holidays,
Yeah.
but it's September, I think it's like 15th or 16th.
Right.
And when Julie and I first heard about it, we knew that this was a holiday that must be celebrated somehow. So Julie threw this huge party in her basement, and everyone got dressed up as pirates.
Yeah.
And we had a costume party in September to celebrate.
Yes.
Well,
Well,
you've inspired me today to get off my boat and go and talk to my neighbours and see if any of them know about International Pirates Day, because they should all know about it at least. Now, Julie, Zanne prefaced at the beginning of the show that you've done a bit of international travel. Where are some of the places you've been to?
well, yeah, 2 weeks after I moved to Arizona, my daughter and I were on a plane um, headed for Italy.
Mm.
So it was a family trip. And so we went on a cruise and explored Croatia and
Mm.
Greece and parts of Italy. And then after the cruise, yeah, I went to Spain and Barcelona. So it was a 2 week trip. And
Yep.
yeah, then,
But didn't you do like a spontaneous trip to Rome? Like you woke up one day and you're like, "Oh, I should go to Rome," and you like jumped on a plane.
but yeah, after the cruise, we were like, okay, we're not done exploring. So yeah, went to Rome and then to
Mm.
rode to Spain and then to Barcelona and then we headed home and then I had to deal with unpacking, jet lagged no less. But yeah, it was after that trip, honestly, after seeing just that part of the world, really kind of
Mm.
grew my wanderlust, and I was like, ooh, traveling is so much fun. I need to do it more often.
Mm.
So,
Were those trips some of the first outside the United States for you?
no, actually, I've been to China before. My daughter is adopted from China.
Okay.
So that was my first international trip.
Now that's quite a place to go to. Whereabouts in China did you go?
We went to Beijing,
Okay.
so got to visit the Great Wall,
Yep.
and then to her province, and then down to Guangzhou before we headed home.
Okay. So a vastly different experience than heading around the streets of Illinois or even Phoenix, that's for
Yes.
sure. So having those international experiences, how does that give you a better perspective on the world and the people and the different cultures? Did it really, you mentioned it opened your appetite for more travel, but did it open your eyes in terms of how other people live and things like that as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I
Mm.
mean, yeah, the streets of Beijing were so crowded, just walking across the street,
Mm.
um, was an adventure in itself, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think, again, I think it made the world actually seem smaller just by going and traveling and seeing all these places. People are just, I think we all want the same things.
Mm.
And we, care for our families, and we just want to, like you said, then I was talking to more people on those trips,
Right.
just trying to, especially in China, just to learn more about the culture where my daughter is from.
Yeah. Yeah. How old's your daughter now?
She is 14.
14. Okay. So I guess in terms of going to places like Italy and Spain and Croatia and being able to actually eat the food from that country rather than having it in a restaurant in the United States is a vastly different experience as well.
It is.
Hmm.
I
Particularly in
love
places like
the
Spain
food
when
in
you'll sit
Italy.
down to dinner at 10 or 11 o'clock at night versus.
Oh, exactly. That was hard to get used to.
So how was it having experiencing things like jet lag and a long flight for the first time and all those sorts of things? How did you handle those things? Was it a huge inconvenience, or was it just something you enjoyed as part of the overall experience?
Oh yeah, it's just something. I mean, it's worth it for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah.
But
So
notice the difference, I think, as I get older. I think I handle the jet lag a little bit differently
Right.
this time
And
around.
any short-term plans to head off back overseas at any stage?
Hopefully, in a few years, I'd like to actually take my daughter back to China
Right.
and do a heritage tour with her,
Yeah,
so she
wonderful.
could see it, through older eyes to see where she's from.
Yeah, that's beautiful. How about you, Zanne? What's the international travel resume that you have at the moment?
I am trying to work on some stuff. Julie and I have some ideas, I think, of where we would like to also take Where Gals Wander, but still in the works. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I'm sure we'll get to find it out when it's time to share that information. But it's good that you're actually planning something like that, because it's a wonderful platform. I'm going to put the link to Where Girls Wonder in the description of the podcast today, so all the listeners can actually connect with you guys and find out and read a lot about the wonderful trips that you've had. Have you posted anything yet on the California road trip?
I posted one blog entry just about the fact that it was supposed to be a wine tasting tour, and every time we would get there, that there was no wine. So I talked a little bit about how we handled that, and managed through that piece as well. And then there's one more piece that I'm still working on. I'm working on that piece, and then I also just got back from NASCAR racing. And meeting with the crew of the NASCAR race team when they were in Talladega.
Down there in Alabama in the south?
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah. So I had all access to the drivers and the pit crews and the garages. So between those two things, I'm trying to get some more content out.
Well, there you go. For all you NASCAR nuts that are listening to the show today, head on over to wheregalswonder.com and check out those posts when Zanne puts them up. We'll give you pretty much a red alert on that when they come out, and you can check them all out. Ladies, it's been really wonderful chatting to you both today, and thank you so much for sharing your amazing friendship, first of all, and secondly, about your great road trip up the California coast. Let's hope you get to go back soon and do a lot more of it and come back on the show and talk to us about it if you like.
We
Well,
would
thank
love
you.
to. Thank you, Mark.
And Julie, you've done a wonderful job for your first experience on a podcast show. Have you enjoyed it?
I have enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, listen, ladies, thank you very much for joining me. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show, and I wish you both a lovely evening over there in the United States of America.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Another fantastic couple of guests on my show today, and what another wonderful example of how travel brings friendships together, but also provides an opportunity for two friends to enjoy each other's company in a way during difficult times as well. That was fantastic. Zanne and Julie, thank you very much again for being on my show. Well, if you're looking for other episodes from the Global Travel Channel podcast show, head over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. You will find all of our previous episodes there. If you like our content, why not tell somebody else about it? Share it with your friends and family and even your work colleagues, and tell them about the Global Travel Channel podcast show. Okay, that's it for this particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Until we meet again, my name is Mark Philpott. I wish you all a great bon voyage.